Lady Tremaine may be the most iconic stepmother ever to have existed in cinema, but not necessarily for a positive reason. No, she was the character who solidified the idea of a wicked or evil stepparent. That being said, her greedy and self-righteous attitude didn't simply weigh heavily upon her famous stepdaughter Cinderella. Sadly, even her own daughters had to face their mother's toxic love, a love so toxic that it involved Lady Tremaine favoring one of her children over the other. But if that wasn't disgusting enough, the reason why Lady Tremaine favored Drizella over Anastasia is truly haunting, especially when you consider the idea that Drizella could have grown up to become an amazing person had she not been manipulated her whole life by her wicked mother. Lady Tremaine may have treated both of her biological children better than she did stepdaughter Cinderella, but that doesn't mean she treated them equally. Drizella's mother wanted both of her daughters to marry into extremely wealthy families with high society status, but throughout her appearances in the animated Cinderella trilogy, Lady Tremaine was subtly shown favoring her eldest daughter over the younger daughter, Anastasia. Disney hinted at this when they pointed out in the first movie that while both daughters were taking music lessons, Lady Tremaine only wanted Drizella to learn how to sing. This could have been due to the belief that during a musical performance, most of the audience focuses on the vocalist rather than the musicians behind them. In other words, Lady Tremaine wanted Drizella front and center, getting all the attention, while she wanted Anastasia to be in the background supporting her sister. On top of that, it was also noted that Lady Tremaine wanted Drizella to study and become more intelligent, but that's never mentioned for Anastasia. Now, that could be because Lady Tremaine felt that her younger daughter was already smart enough, but what seems more likely is that she wanted Drizella to become the smarter of the two of them. You could probably just assume that Lady Tremaine was favoring Drizella simply because she was the eldest of the two daughters and should set a good example for her younger sister. But it seems like there's actually more to it than that. In fact, there's a good chance that psychology played a role in Lady Tremaine's differing treatment of her children, and it might hold all of the answers. You couldn't call it a true psychological assessment of the Tremaine family without discussing the concept of nature versus nurture. This long-standing debate among psychologists and biologists alike may seem like a lot, but you can actually use a majority of Disney films as prime examples to reinforce either side of the argument, and Drizella's relationship with her mother is no different. For those unfamiliar with the argument of nature versus nurture, it's basically the idea that one of those two things, nature or nurture, determines who a person is and how they act. Whether you're on the nature side of the debate, believing that a person's characteristics are formed and influenced by innate biological factors, or the nurture side, believing it's about the person's upbringing and life experiences more generally, it's believed that one of those two factors is what determines a person's future. That being said, you don't necessarily need to be specific to one side of the debate. In fact, there's an ancient Greek concept that sees a combination of the two. The concept considers that both a person's genetics, along with how they were raised, has a heavy influence on the type of person they'll become, although one will typically hold more influence over the other, usually. Drizella is a perfect example of this, and it actually seems like this is why Lady Tremaine always favored her over Anastasia, because she was influenced much more by Lady Tremaine's nurturing, or lack thereof, than Anastasia was, and as a result, Drizella became essentially a young copy of her evil mother. When you look at the two sisters beyond the surface level of their characters, they're quite different from one another, and Drizella was arguably the easier of the two to manipulate. This vulnerability is something that could easily be taken advantage of, especially considering who their mother was. Lady Tremaine likely knew this, and her wickedness led her to do something that a mother should never do: pick favorites. Even in the first Cinderella movie, the differences between Drizella and Anastasia were apparent, and that only became more noticeable as the two sequels carried on the story. In the first movie, both Anastasia and Drizella were depicted as spoiled, greedy, and rotten, just like their mother. They were both selfish and shown to be jealous of anything that Cinderella was considered to be good at. This is where Lady Tremaine's manipulative ways came into play. Any praise that Cinderella got in any form set them both off, although Drizella would always have the more predictable reaction, which might be one of the reasons Lady Tremaine favored her. This predictability that Drizella showed to be more reactionary made it easier for Lady Tremaine to manipulate her, and that's exactly what she did. This could be seen toward the beginning of the end of Disney's 1950 Cinderella film, when the titular character first showed up in her beautiful homemade dress. In that scene, she was shown wearing a familiar jade necklace that was the exact one that Drizella had discarded earlier in the movie. Drizella didn't like the jade necklace at all, that is, until Lady Tremaine decided to stir the pot. She mentioned how charming the necklace looked on Cinderella's dress, knowing that it would cause a reaction from her daughter. Drizella then flew into a fit of rage and brutally tore the chain from her stepsister's neck. Lady Tremaine was likely smiling sinisterly, knowing that she could set up her daughter so easily and exploit that anger to make Drizella do anything she wanted. After tearing the necklace off, Drizella proceeded to destroy Cinderella's dress, with Anastasia joining in on the cruel deed as well, all because Lady Tremaine wanted it to happen, though Drizella was much too naive to realize this, and that's likely a major reason why Lady Tremaine favored her over Anastasia, because Drizella could be so easily manipulated. Drizella's value values about what's important in life are probably something else that shaped her into Lady Tremaine's favorite child, especially her outlook on love in comparison to wealth. This is actually another way that Drizella differed from her younger sister as well. While Anastasia was interested in true love and happiness, Drizella was much more interested in wealth and social status, just like her mother. You could see their differing views clearly in the Cinderella sequel Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True. The movie was split into 3 separate stories, with the third story mainly focusing on Lady Tremaine's daughters. In the tale, An Uncommon Romance, neither Anastasia nor her sister has changed much, meaning they're both still very greedy and rude, at least at the beginning of the story. That all changed when Anastasia met the baker in town for the first time, which is when she started to become a genuine romantic. She quickly fell in love with the town baker and showed that she didn't need wealth to be happy, despite what Lady Tremaine had raised her to strive for. And as you could probably guess, Lady Tremaine disapproved of Anastasia's relationship with the baker, but she wasn't the only one. You see, much like Lady Tremaine wished Anastasia was, Drizella was still conditioned into thinking that status and greed were all that mattered. She even told her younger sister that if she married the baker, that they would be the laughing stock of the entire town. Well, thankfully for Anastasia, she rebelled against her mother and Drizella and chose to be happy with her newfound love. Drizella, on the other hand, decided to stick with her mother's ways, and after Lady Tremaine stormed off at the end of the story, Drizella shortly followed suit. This proved that despite her younger sister wisening up to Lady Tremaine's wicked ways, Drizella was still willing to follow their mother no matter what, which would have certainly reinforced Lady Tremaine's feelings of favoritism. And Lady Tremaine didn't show any signs of loosening her grasp on her favorite child, as she continued to keep Drizella close throughout the rest of the Cinderella story. This includes the third film, Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time, in which Lady Tremaine and Drizella were plotting to destroy Cinderella's newfound happiness. To be fair, Anastasia was involved in the plan as well, but much like in An Uncommon Romance, the younger of the two daughters had a change of heart throughout the film and decided to help Cinderella instead. This wasn't the case for Drizella, though, who continued to follow in her mother's footsteps and listen to every order that she commanded in pursuit of a wealthy and lazy lifestyle. Even when their plans started to turn sour and Anastasia decided not to go through with her marriage to the prince in Cinderella's stead, Drizella still chose to align herself with the wrong side. Drizella could be seen attempting to turn Cinderella into a toad as she told Lady Tremaine to use the fairy godmother's magic wand, proving once again that she was loyal to Lady Tremaine until the very end. And that level of loyalty, combined with how easily Lady Tremaine could manipulate Drizella, is what made her the favored child over Anastasia, who proved that there was more to life than wealth, greed, and social status. Thankfully, though, before Lady Tremaine was able to use the magic spell to transform Cinderella, the prince stepped in and used his sword to deflect the spell. The spell went flying back at Drizella and Lady Tremaine, turning the two of them into toads instead of their intended target. The transformation wasn't long-lasting, though, and the two eventually turned back into their human forms. After that, not much is known about what happened to them. The ending credits of Cinderella 3 seem to imply that Drizella and her mother were both now scullery maids as their punishment for trying to trick the prince and take his true love away from him. They were even shown wearing the same scullery maid outfit that Cinderella was forced to wear in the first movie, which was a nice callback. But no matter how you look at it, it's clear that Lady Tremaine dragged Drizella right down with her, and that was certainly a drawback to being her mother's favorite. I'm curious what you think about it, though. Why do you think Drizella was Lady Tremaine's favorite child, and did it have anything to do with her ability to manipulate her elder daughter over Anastasia? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below.